Basu's visit to France and its impact.
Thank you very much. The subject is vast and the time allotted is very short. And with co-speakers like Dr. Shafir and Sri Adak, the danger of digression is always there. So, to avoid that embarrassment, I have prepared a short paper from which I read it out. So, with your kind permission, I'm just reading it. Thank you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to address you on the auspicious occasion of Rabindra Jayanti and explore his fascinating connection with France. While I wouldn't claim to be an authority, I'd like to offer some insights. The cultural exchange between India and France, as you are aware, stretches back to the Mughal era. Initially, these interactions revolved around trade and travel. Colonial ambitions emerged later, but ultimately paled in comparison to the dominance of the British Empire. The French presence in India remained confined to Pondicherry and Chandernagore, and even in these enclaves, their influence was circumscribed by the British. Although the French-Indian contact began almost 400 years ago, it wasn't until the mid-18th century that a more significant French interest in India materialized. The first instance of Indian influence on French literature can be found in Jean de La Fontaine's celebrated fables, which incorporated elements from the Panchatantra. La Fontaine himself acknowledged this, stating, "This is a second book of fables that I present to the public. I must acknowledge that the greater part is inspired from Tirpe, an Indian sage, that is Vishnugupta. In 1731, the Royal Library of Paris acquired a manuscript of the Rig Veda. However, deciphering the manuscript proved a formidable challenge until around 1780. Gradually, French scholarly interest regarding India blossomed. In 1803, Sanskrit instruction commenced in Paris under the patronage of Hamilton and Armand Lenoir de Chésy. The Collège des Français established a dedicated Sanskrit professorship in 1814-15, with Antoine Lenoir de Chésy appointed to the prestigious position. Furthermore, a poet of French origin who visited Tipu Sultan's court in the 1790s penned a poem on Tipu Sultan following his martyrdom in 1799. In this context, it's worth mentioning that the French Revolution profoundly influenced Tipu Sultan. He allegedly adopted the name Citizen Tipu and allied himself with the French in the struggle against British forces. He also planted the Tree of Liberty in his capital, that is Srirangapattanam. This burgeoning field of Indology in France naturally fostered a reciprocal interest among Indians. The Tagore family stands as a pioneer in this regard. As many of you know, in the early 19th century, the Tagores of Calcutta played a pivotal role in bridging the cultural gap between India and the West. The Tagore family's connection with France and its culture began in 1845 with Prince Bharatanath Tagore's visit to Paris. The earliest evidence of Tagore's interest, the Tagore family's interest in French literature, comes from Jyotirindranath Tagore's memoir about his father. He wrote that Devendranath Tagore, that is Jyotirindranath and Rabindranath Tagore's father, Devendranath Tagore used a multitude of French to English dictionaries to decipher French books. Jyotirindranath himself, however, was quite fluent in the language and even translated works by Maupassant, Molière, and other French literary icons into Bengali. Rabindranath, Jyotirindranath's younger brother, also developed an interest in French, but wasn't able to achieve enough fluency. This despite his dedication, he could only achieve a limited understanding of the spoken and written language, but still did manage to translate some poems by Victor Hugo from French to Bengali. Rabindranath visited French several times, 5 times, both before and after receiving the Nobel Prize. During his later visits, that is after 1913, he met and befriended prominent figures such as Romarola, André Gide, and many others. In my opinion, India, and Tagore particularly, owes a significant debt to France, especially to Romarola, when Tagore was momentarily misled by the fascist dictator Mussolini. It was Rola's unwavering persuasion that convinced him to travel to the Soviet Union, and this trip had a profound impact on Tagore, leading him to take a firm stance against fascism, which is evident in his later works of poetry and art that satirize Hitler and Mussolini. However, due to time constraints, it is not possible to delve into every aspect of Tagore's French connection. We must therefore curtail this discussion to focus on a specific facet: his painting exhibition organized by Victoria Ocampo in Paris in 1930. We will explore how his paintings acted as a precursor to the concept of postmodernism, a movement that later flourished in France. Rabindranath, like on many of his earlier voyages, set sail for France in early March 1930, accompanied by his family and his secretary. Arriving in France by late March, he settled in a charming villa bathed in the warm glow of the southern sun. Here, amidst the sky bursting with colors, he indulged in a newfound passion, that is, sketching. In a letter to poet Rabindranath Dutta, he mentioned a German admirer who urged him to exhibit his works in Berlin, expressing a glimmer of hope for recognition. However, a deeper yearning burned within him, a desire to escape the indifference he felt towards his art back home. To some extent, Tagore was even humiliated for his art in India. It is very unfortunate. Prior to this European adventure, Tagore's artistic endeavors were largely dismissed by many Indians as a hobby. His abstract creations, devoid of recognizable figures or scenes, were seen as a refuge from perceived alleged shortcomings in his poetry. This lack of appreciation likely fueled his decision to showcase his work in Paris, the heart of the art world. Victoria Ocampo, a literary acquaintance from Argentina, became the bridge between Tagore and the Parisian art scene. Tagore himself informed her of his paintings and his desire to exhibit them. Victoria had previously encountered Tagore in 1924, where she had witnessed firsthand the birth of his artistic expression. In her memoirs, she described a notebook filled with Bengali poems and surprising doodles, faces, creatures, and even bottles. These errors, so-called errors, from his poems, she noted, found new life in playful sketches, a testament to Tagore's creative spark. She wrote, "There was a small notebook lying on his table filled with Bengali poems. It wasn't a transgression for me to glance at it occasionally, considering it was Bengali. The contents surprised and softened me. Through these scribbles, the poet seemed to reveal in his act of creation various faces, prehistoric creatures, reptiles, and even bottles emerged from these lines. All the errors, crossed out lines, and discarded words from his poems found a new life in this different realm, gazing back at us as if with a smile." This little notebook marked the genesis of Rabindranath Tagore, the artist. And she further added, "I was captivated by his obsession. I had ignited a spark within him on that very subject. 6 years later, in Paris, when our paths crossed again, that lively conversation remained intertwined with his art. Upon Tagore's arrival in Paris, Victoria became his tireless champion. She not only offered her support and companionship, but also leveraged her influence to generate interest in his work. Her efforts proved highly successful, paving the way for Tagore's artistic recognition on the international stage. Numerous international exhibitions of his paintings were organized, but Paris was the first center of art to hold it between May 2nd and 19th in 1930 at the Galerie Pigalle. The Paris exhibition fetched great acclaim for his artistic genius. People were impressed by the creations he came up with. Even great intellectuals of the Parisian realm expressed amazement over how he so easily brought to fore what they had only just begun to think about, the newness that lurked beneath the surface of the art movements of France and the Occident. The paintings, despite Tagore's partial color-blindness, he was colorblind, partially colorblind, a form of red-green color-blindness, exploded with symphony of bold, contrasting hues. You have seen what Dr. Sri Adarsh showed you. These bold and contrasting hues, and this apparent contradiction actually lay at the heart of his artistic brilliance. He transcended his limitation, weaving intricate color patterns and employing masterful draftsmanship to create works that resonated with the exponential growth of modern art movement. If we look at his paintings carefully, we'll find that Tagore's lines exhibit a fascinating duality, some characterized by abrupt curves and a sense of diagonal dynamism, while others possess a cylindrical, not a cyclical rhythm. Color, for him, transcended the role as a more component or compositional tool. It wasn't about faithfully replicating objects or conveying emotions. Rather, it's a fundamental tenet of the pictorial language itself. Unlike conventional paintings, Tagore's work eschewed purely representational color use. Instead, he pioneered a unique color formation or plastic color that resonated with the subjective experience of consciousness. Beyond lines and colors, Tagore's paintings pulsate with an undeniable vitality. They embody a philosophical exploration of being. Modern Western art often employs a trope of primitivism to express modernity. Tagore's work too embodies this intriguing paradox, a singular fusion of the ancient and the contemporary. Art critic Ananda Kumaraswamy aptly characterized it as modern primitive art. While his paintings possess a raw energy of primitive art, they are undeniably sophisticated and intellectual. One might like Tagore's artistic process to a dreamlike state, a form of spontaneous painting, or perhaps the fluid animation of film. It's a self-generating process that surpasses conscious control. As a matter of fact, Rabindranath Tagore's paintings defy easy classification. They are neither strictly primitive nor wholly modern. They reside in a space beyond, that is, a pseudo-modern realm, echoing the tenets of surrealism. This surmodernism emerges from a complex interplay of elements: primitivism, tradition, self-expression, sophistication, echoes of both modernity and postmodernism. Though the movement began much later, but he had postmodernist, attributes. A deep connection to his community and the very essence of the artist himself. This intricate aesthetic equation defines the unique character of Tagore's visual masterpieces. After going through his paintings and drawings, his doodles and cartoons, it appears that Tagore's artistic practice, particularly his unconventional color harmonies and stylistic hybridity, anticipates the concerns that would come to define the postmodernist movement. Firstly, Tagore's color blindness, a biological predisposition affecting his perception of red and green, was a potential catalyst for his distinct chromatic palette. Deviating from traditional representational forms, his artworks prioritize subjective color experience, a characteristic echo of postmodern emphasis on individual expression over mimetic accuracy. The subversion of established visual codes aligned with the broader postmodern project of dismantling grand narratives and universal truths in favor of personal perspectives. Secondly, the coexistence of seemingly disparate stylistic elements within the paintings merits closer examination. The juxtaposition of primitive and modern aesthetics exemplifies a blurring of boundaries, a hallmark of postmodern artistic practice. This deliberate defiance of established categories challenges the notion of singular linear progression of artistic styles, mirroring the postmodern critique of overarching historical narratives. Finally, the concept of self-movement and automatism in Tagore's paintings, suggesting an emphasis on the act of creation itself, reverberates with the focus on process found in various postmodern art movements. This prioritization of the performative elements of art making aligns with the postmodern preoccupation with deconstructing the artist's role and disrupting traditional notions of artistic mastery. In conclusion, Tagore's artistic production, which garnered significant recognition following his 1930 Parisian exhibition, can be viewed as a harbinger of the postmodern movement that would gain prominence in the years following the Second World War. His unconventional artistic choices and engagement with subjective experience prefigure the concerns that would come to define the postmodern era, marking him a fascinating figure at the crossroads of modern and postmodern artistic sensibilities. Thank you so much for your patience.